If you're looking for honest, real-world, no BS advice on how to create income, build wealth, and achieve true freedom with real estate, you're in the right place. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Preacher Podcast Show, where your host Randy Lawrence shares with you his experiences and strategies from over decades as a successful real estate investor. This episode is sponsored by Prosperity Capital Partners. Learn more at prosperitycapitalpartners.net. Now, on to the show.
All right. Hey, welcome to the show. We've got a super exciting episode today. It is going to be action-packed, and it's going to have great information that's really going to help you. I've got a special guest from my alum over at University of South Florida, Larissa Greene. She is with Advanta IRA, which is a local firm that operates nationally here, and they are a self-directed custodian, and we're going to talk about exactly what that means here in just a moment. Larissa, hey, welcome to the show today. We're so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, for sure. It's and I know right now we're recording today. We're in the midst of this pandemic and all this that's going on in the country, but we really wanted to focus on this because I know a lot of people have either been, sheltered at home, laid off from work. So not only are they getting kind of hit with that, but then their 401k or their IRA that they have is also getting hit because of the market decline. Good Lord, down as low as 30%, now jumped back up 10 and, still down 20% for the year. And so just really a tough spot for a lot of people. And so this is a very appropriate moment for us to talk about these things because some folks that are out there and that listen to the show, they may not know what it means about self-directing your IRA or self-directing your 401k investment that a company used to work at. So let's talk a little bit about and dive into Advanta IRA and help explain to our listeners, what your company does and why it's so important that we're talking at this moment.
Okay. So most people haven't heard of self-directed IRA accounts. A lot of times when we talk about something that's self-directed, people tend to think of their brokerage firm and how they can make the choices on those investments through the firm. And so, they believe that they're self-directing, but as a matter of fact, our definition of self-directed retirement accounts is much different.
Mm-hmm.
We actually don't sell any investments at all. What we do instead is hold the retirement account per IRS rules. And then our clients are out there finding their investments. They're putting those investments to work, or those accounts to work for them. And so what that means is we're not holding anything market-based at all, but it's going to be those alternative investments that maybe a lot of people hear about, but then just don't realize that they can use retirement accounts to turn into or use for alternative investing. And so it's basically finding things like real estate, and there's so many options when you're talking about real estate investing. It could be things like precious metals and private companies, cryptocurrencies, but again, anything outside of the market, as long as it's within the rules for self-directing, and that's IRS rules. So the IRS says basically you can make these investments, but they need to be basically at arm's length.
Mm-hmm.
And so as long as you're following those rules, those are investments that you can make. And really, just about the sky's the limit for the types of assets that you can hold. And the truth is it's always been allowed. So typically when I talk to people and they say, you mean I can buy rental real estate or invest in multifamily property through my IRA? Is this new? Is this something that they've just started allowing? And the truth is you've always been allowed to do it. There's just not a lot of companies out there like Advanta that will hold those assets.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, so the truth of the matter is, and so I was a registered investment advisor, a Series 7 licensed stockbroker, owned my own company, was in that field for about 15 years. And so just, like when you say, when most people think of their IRA, they think, okay, they had a 401k at their company, or for many years, they were putting money into an IRA. They left that company. They roll it over to a brokerage firm at, TD Waterhouse or AG Edwards or Raymond James or whoever it may be, where then that money goes into, like you said, okay, self-directed. I'm picking this mutual fund and this mutual fund or these stock portfolio, or their broker is, saying, hey, here's a good mix of 60-40 stocks and bonds, and now that's your IRA. Where the truth is, they have a choice and an option to self-direct to then actually invest in alternative investments that are not correlated to the stock market, like you said, with either real estate or notes or precious metals, things that, may be able to better weather some of the things that we've seen going on, and realistically, one of the things in fact, talking with a gentleman after our call, where again, that's part of his thing. He's got money that's in the stock market, but also wants to have non-correlated investments to his overall portfolio so that some of his money is invested in real estate where it's not correlated to the up and down of what's going on in the stock market, but more driving a return by the cash flow and the rents that are coming in. So it's something, it sounds a little bit like, as you describe it, I'm like, oh, for listeners, they can be, wow, there's all these rules, but the truth is, you guys, just like a TD Waterhouse or Raymond James or whoever you want to call, you guys handle the following of, here's the guidelines. So you simplify the process. So it's not like a listener, if they want to start self-directing, has to become some monster expert in how to navigate all the IRS rules. Very similar, I would say, to like when they left their 401k and rolled it over to their bank or brokerage firm. A similar process exists with you guys. Is that accurate?
That is, yes, exactly right. I think sometimes people think, well, I have to put my money to work. I don't understand the rules. It can be intimidating. But yeah, we're here to answer your questions. And actually, we have classes every week, always no cost, no obligation. So actually, right after this call, I'm going to be doing a webinar on putting your 2019 contribution to work. So, it's important to keep in mind that I think just very normally, very typically, we think of stock in our portfolio and we don't even consider how is that titled? Where do the returns go? It's sort of set on automatic. Well, the same can be said for real estate types of investments as well, where the titling is taken in the name of the retirement account. The returns go back to the retirement account. So we're already familiar with the process. We're just replacing the asset with something different. It is not a loan to the IRA or from the IRA to the individual. It is actually an investment of that account.
Well, that's a great moment there, right there. So it's the exact same kind of account. So again, like if you've got an IRA over at the brokerage firm, it's the exact same thing, that now you've got an IRA at the Advanta firm. And instead of putting stocks or mutual funds inside of the IRA, you're now able to invest in different alternative options, such as real estate, investments related to real estate or precious metals, or cryptocurrencies. And again, I think most people were looking for things that would be maybe less volatile than what they may experience in the stock market. And that's why, of course, I think a lot of people view real estate as a investment venue that's good for them. They recognize that. Virtually everybody's living somewhere, right? We've got either a house that we're living in or apartment we living in, whether we own it or rent it. That's just a human reality that everybody needs a place to live. And so that's kind of fundamentally why real estate's always been there in this country as a, focus of investment, because, good Lord, we've got 350 million people and they all need a place to live.
That's true. And we see a lot of times people look at the advantage of self-directing. And of course, this isn't an all or nothing strategy. The opportunity to diversify is really what we see in a self-directed retirement account. And so, a lot of people right now that had invested into the market, they may not want to move the entire account, but this is your opportunity to diversify if you haven't done it before. And the advantage to something like real estate is it's a tangible asset. And so the idea behind being able to see what you've invested in, drive by it, touch, feel it, that's a real big advantage in real estate. And, I mentioned things like precious metals and cryptocurrencies, but I will tell you that we have over $1 billion assets under management, and over 30% of those are going to be related to real estate of some kind. And I know you would think the number would be higher, but actually that 30% makes up the largest percentage of any asset class that we hold. So, there is the idea there that although, real estate also does fluctuate, it is going to be there for you.
Yeah, and it's more, the reality is, and I think that's why that's such a large percentage within your guys' overall company that individual investors have chosen. And again, it's not you guys haven't chosen it for them. The individual
Right.
investors have chosen real estate because there's a recognition that, like you said, though the stock market is down 30%, up 10, still down 20, that real estate is a more stable because there's an asset there. Now, that doesn't mean that the value can't fluctuate, but realistically,
Right.
if there's a tenant living in the property, paying rent, there's not a need to sell the property in this moment where, let's say, like right now in the middle of this pandemic, less people are geared up to buy a house. I mean, our company's involved in that arena for sure. And so you see that's slowed down because people are focused on the pandemic, but it's not a necessity to have to sell it. Or like for us, we also own and manage apartment complexes all over the country. And realistically, we're not forced to have to sell one of our apartment complexes right now in the midst of this chaotic environment. So regardless if there's a fluctuation in value, it really isn't affecting us in this immediate term as much as like the stock market, where it's like wham, because what's happening there is people are just selling to try to, get money back and get out. And, and that really damages the person's portfolio and or potentially their return. So
Right.
let's talk about too. I mean, no doubt the folks that are listening say, well, hey, this sounds like it could be something that really is good and can help me. What are some of the options? I know we talked about that. So like realistically, like a person could invest in buying a house through their IRA, and then that IRA owns the house, and then they have a tenant that's, living in the home, paying rent, and now that rent goes back to the IRA account, not really to them, correct?
That is correct. So it's important that when you make the investment, you have the understanding that the growth is for the retirement account and not for you personally. So when you make an investment again into stock, we don't even really consider where the gains go or how the losses affect us, because we're just very used to that idea of stock in a retirement account. But the same is going to be for real estate. So you can say exactly the same thing. The same rules apply when you invest in real estate. So when you buy 123 Main Street, for example, and you rent it out and it's gaining, $1,000 a month in rental income, the title is actually taken in the name of the IRA. So in our case, it would be the administrator first, and then the for benefit of the account holder second. So Advanta IRA for benefit of Larissa Greene's IRA account. That's exactly how the title is held.
Yep.
And then from there, once the tenant is in place, those rent checks are going to go back to Advanta, made payable to the IRA account and deposited as earnings on the IRA.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, a big question that I get oftentimes is, well, what happens when the earnings exceed the contribution limit for the year? Well, remember, the contribution limit is the amount you can take out of your pocket and put into your retirement account each year. So, I'm talking about that today in my webinar. So
Yeah.
if you put $6,000 into the IRA, well, that has nothing to do with the earnings. So when your tenant is paying your rent, and let's say it's $12,000 for the year, those earnings are considered unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go back directly deposited to the IRA account. And then another thing you need to be aware of is if there's any expense to that property, then it's paid by the IRA account.
Yeah.
And so the good news there is that it's not money out of your pocket, it's coming from the IRA. And
Yeah.
so typically what I like to do is sort of consider your IRA as your investment partner, so to speak. So the IRA puts the money into the investment, it pays the expenses, and it also receives the income.
Yeah. Yeah. So just in a simplistic way, somebody's got $120,000 in their IRA account. they could buy $100,000 rental house, and now it's in their IRA, owns the house. The tenant now pays $1,000 a month, and so they're bringing in $12,000 a year back to their IRA. And then, the taxes and insurance on it, let's say for the year, are $2,000. So again, out of their $12,000, they pay $2,000 to cover the taxes and insurance. And so they've gained $10,000 for the year on that $100,000 rental house investment. So again, that's a great, great return for them. It all stays inside of their IRA. And again, that's just theoretical there. I mean, based on the example, but again, that way their IRA account is growing because of the rents. And now the other piece of that is then there can be that the value of the house over time is gaining value as well. So if you owned the house for 5 years or 10 years and then sold it for more money, that gain goes back into the IRA as well. Again,
Yep.
and so some people though, again, no doubt they're like, oh, good, man, that sounds fantastic. But God, I don't know that I want to be dealing with a tenant. Like, and so there's other things that people can do to be able to invest in real estate in a more passive way. And realistically, we've seen where, folks work with us on single family homes in that example, where they lend money, where our company then purchases the home, renovates it, sells it. And so they're getting a return more passively by that single family investment because they're lending money through their IRA, backed and secured by the real estate investment. So that's, one approach that we've seen people take for sure.
Yes, and that is a big one, because you do have a lot of seasoned investors that like to buy rental property, but then when it comes to their IRA, they don't want to have to worry about tenants, toilets, and termites. So they turn to private lending. And the great thing about lending money in your IRA is you get the security of a property. For Advanta's purposes and IRS rules, it doesn't have to be a first mortgage. It can be a second or third. But what I usually say there is just make sure you're comfortable with the investment that you're making. And then, of course, you're going to determine the rate at which your IRA is going to grow. So if you're willing to lend money at 8%, your return is 8%. If there's points involved, so there's a lot of great alternatives to physically buying the property. You can do things like lend money. You can do joint venturing. You can do option contracts and lease options. So there's a lot of ways to get involved with real estate where you don't have to be a landlord if that's really not your cup of tea.
For sure. Well, and that's where we've seen too, like even in the apartment complex space that we own at this present moment, 11 complexes throughout the country. And we have investors that partner together with us because the apartment complex is an interesting thing because you've got more leverage. So instead of owning one house, you own 100 units or 150 or 200 apartment units at one location. And so you gain a much greater scale that exists than owning just one house. And then with that, you also gain greater leverage. And so then now people are able to invest in that complex, and then they own a percentage of that complex and are getting the benefit of all the tenants and all the rent that's coming in as a return, without the headaches of maybe owning a single home where, the tenant moves out and now you got to find another tenant. With an apartment complex, you've got a full-time manager that her or his full-time 40+ hour a week job is managing the tenants and finding new tenants. And then you've got a full-time maintenance person that's there where if there's a problem with the AC, the tenant's not calling you, they're calling the office. And then the maintenance guy's right there on staff and he's able to go out and fix it. So it's a much more passive approach that I've found a lot of people, like you mentioned, they are interested in that return, but they don't want the headaches of having to deal with tenants. And so that's a great option that a lot of people have pursued because it's just makes sense.
And, I think probably intimidating to many people is, so, we talked about, your administrator, Advanta IRA, helping you through the process. And so I don't want it to sound overly complicated. Just keep in mind that when you're looking at these investments, the title is held in the name of the IRA, but we would help you with that. It's not, okay, here's your account and go ahead and do it. It's, hey, I found this investment. I want to do an investment into, a multifamily syndication. What does that look like? You just simply get us the paperwork, and then we walk you through the process. We get it titled properly, whether you're a limited partner or you're going directly on the title. It's a very easy process. It's, once you find the investment, you come to us and we help you get it done. And we kind of explain the process and hold your hand through the closing or through the investment.
Yeah. So it's something, again, I'm glad you mentioned that, because again, even what we're talking about, people can be like, oh my gosh. And the truth of the matter is, it is like, even with our side, we have an internal person that, his role is to facilitate helping get paperwork completed and walking people through the process. And then even I know on your side, because we've worked together with you as well, that it's like you have internal team members that, again, they're dedicated to walking the person through that process. So very much the same way like you would do at, say, a Fidelity or a Vanguard or whatever company you may be normally familiar with in a stock-based environment. They're walking you through the paperwork. It's a simple process, and it's an easy step-by-step thing, that it's not overly complex. The great result of that, though, is that you end up now being able to, like we said in the very beginning, self-direct, meaning that you can choose alternative investments that may be a better match for your risk profile than just being kind of in the stock market and riding the up and down of it. And or most people, like from my experience, and I was in this arena, like I said, 15 years, most people tend to just take the advice of what the broker says. The broker makes an explanation, here's what to do, and they just go, okay, that makes sense, and really don't necessarily see maybe all the inherent risk until it's like, oh crap, I opened my statement and my account's down 25%. And it's like my 200,000 now is 150. And they're like, what on earth? And then now they see, like, wow, maybe it wasn't exactly like I understood it to be when the guy was telling me. And so that's where I think having the self-directed is so critical, because you can more manage that yourself and not just be at the whims of, say, a stockbroker or someone in that position that's, just saying, here's what you should do, and you do it kind of almost blindly. And I think that this, in today's environment, people need to take a more hands-on approach with how they're going to manage their money in order to be secure for their retirement.
Yeah, and it's part of diversifying your portfolio. But I will say I do have a lot of clients who are, lifelong real estate investors, that they don't believe in the market, and so they 100% invested their self-directed IRA. But not everybody does that.
No.
Many people are just moving over what they need in order to make a single investment, and that's very typical.
Yeah.
Most of the time when I speak to people, they're making this one investment self-directed. And of course, everybody is different. They might, invest into a limited partnership for multifamily, but then, all of a sudden it sounds good to them to also hold gold and silver bars. These accounts are not limited to any type of asset class. You can make any number of investments through them, or just a single investment. So it's completely up to the account holder.
Yeah. And I think that's critical to see, that it's not an all or nothing option. And it's also not one way's right for everybody. That's the beauty of self-directed. You can choose for yourself what you think is the appropriate and right mix. And again, what we've seen, and we got into real estate back in 2003, because as I said, 15 years prior to that, I was a money manager. And then I started investing in real estate and saw the power of the returns that are possible and the reduction of risk, which was a far greater vehicle than what I saw as the options. And again, we did everything: stocks, bonds, options, futures, mutual funds, the whole bit. And I just saw that the beta, or the risk adjusted return in real estate, was a better mousetrap, at least in my perception at the time. And so we began moving in that direction. And then 2003 really, started going into real estate, having others invest with us. And ultimately in 2006, I sold my investment company, just because, again, I believe in the vehicle of real estate more so than I did in what the capacities were for the stock market based investments. Now, again, that's just my position. But again, what I've also seen is people will invest with us and maybe they start off with a certain amount and then they begin to experience the result of it. And then as a result of that experience, they begin to become more, I don't know if confident or comfortable would be the right word, but it's like they begin to like what real estate can do, and then begin to make some shifts in their overall percentages. And again, that's where it's not a right or wrong way. It's not an all or nothing thing, but it's something that if a person is not engaged in this self-directed, I would venture to tell you now's the time, because again, you look at what's going on, the type of volatility that exists. That stock market volatility has always existed, right? We're just now experiencing the pain of the moment, and we've had a good run, no doubt. But it's like, the truth is that's going to happen again. Though we get back into a market cycle that's good, it's very cyclical, and that kind of thing happens. And so, you know, somebody that's got all their eggs in that basket, especially tough when they're at retirement, because now they're 65, they're drawing off, you know, 6-8% to feed their income, and then wham, their portfolio takes a 25% hit. Well, now just to get back to break even, you've got to earn 33%, but you also drew out 6. So now you got to earn 39. It's like, wow, it's like, that's tough. And so this type of investing really, no doubt, can help people diversify.
Yep, that's right. And you know, it's just one of those things where a lot of times people will ask me, what do you think is the most successful investment? And there's really not a good or right answer to that, because people are successful all across the board in all types of
Yeah,
investments. It just depends on what you're looking at. Sometimes your level of knowledge, but other times who you partner with.
that's key.
You know, so there's all kinds of ways to do alternative investing, and there's, like you said, you know, there's not really one fit for everybody. It's always different, and I think that's what, you know, we usually say with a self-directed IRA is invest in what you know. And so,
Yeah.
you know, do your due diligence, find the investment that you want to make, and you know, use that power, that knowledge to make those investments. And so that's really the great thing about a self-directed account. And then, you know, a couple other things I wanted to mention too is that for whatever reason, oftentimes people think that a self-directed IRA has to be a Roth IRA. I'm not really sure where that comes from,
Hmm.
but I hear that all the time. And so just to kind of clarify, the truth is any type of IRA, anything that ends in IRA can be self-directed.
Yep.
And then, of course, you have the opportunity with old employers' plans or something that you're not participating in any longer, that can be rolled over to an IRA and self-directed. Some current employers' plans, but it always depends on the plan. And sometimes it depends on the length of time that you've participated or
Mhm.
your age as to whether or not they'll allow you to move a portion of that to self-direct. And then, of course, there's the opportunity through employers' plans such as solo 401ks, for example. So if you're
Mhm.
self-employed and you want to have a solo 401k or a one participant plan, you can do that as well.
Yeah. So even now too, you think about, there's tons of people, realistically, I think it's almost 17 million people now have been laid off in the country. It's terrible, no doubt. And this
Terrible.
pandemic and the virus is, you know, just wreaking havoc across the country, no doubt. But even with those folks that are affected in that manner, the truth is, if a person's been laid off from their company, they're no longer employed at that company. In most instances, they would then have the opportunity to then roll over their 401k from that employer into an IRA of their choosing. And this would be a moment that they can roll to that self-directed account, so that they can gain greater control of that money, versus just some people, like in an honest way, I've seen back in the day when I was, you know, in this field, meeting with people, you know, doing financial planning, all that, there'd be people that they left the company 5 years ago and they had 80 grand just still sitting in the company 401k. And it's like, I mean, no control, no choice, no nothing. And it's like, oh my God, you got to move that over to get control of it. So, you know, unfortunately for those folks that are affected, that can be where they can roll that money over into their own account, and convert to an IRA. Or like you said, with the person who is self-employed, they can do a solo 401k. And again, you guys help with the paperwork of that. So it's not like a complex thing where you got to figure out the world. It's like, okay, what kind of account do you have and where is it? Okay, here's the paperwork that we need to do. Boom, boom, boom. You fill this in, fill it out, and then we'll transfer the money into your account. And it's really that simple in terms of the
Mhm.
approach, right?
Yes, exactly right. We're always helping people. Typically when I teach, I talk about the specific definitions of things like a direct rollover or a transfer. But the truth is, you don't really need to know that. We're going to help you. I'm going to say, okay, what type of account is it? Where is it coming from? And then we'll go over how to get that money over to us without a taxable event.
For
So,
sure.
that's a big worry to people. How do I know this is not a taxable event? Well, because we're going to help you. We're going to get
Yeah.
it done properly.
That's
You're
your
not going to
job,
pay
really. That's
taxes.
you guys are the ones overseeing that. You guys are making
Hmm.
sure and helping the person. So it really is an easy thing. One of the things you mentioned earlier in talking about, real estate and the investment part of it, I think about people that have asked me, it's like, well, yeah, you know, the real estate's great, but even now, what's going on? How's it working? With everybody laid off. And again, like even for us, we would plan for in our complexes, anticipating a recession was coming. Nobody could ever, anticipate a pandemic and black swan event like this. But
Right.
even now, what we've seen in our complexes, and we've been very proactive working with our residents, providing them with the resources for those affected where, we've got the state unemployment links and local benefits, federal benefits, all that stuff. We've been very diligent in working with our on-site managers, coaching them every 2 days because they're kind of moved from just a apartment manager to like a life coach where they're coaching people and helping them to navigate through these things. But the result of that is that when we compare back against February and March, first week of the month collections, like the 7th of the month, we're on track for very similar collections right now as to where we were in the 2 preceding months. And so again, demonstrates, again, that people desire and need a roof over their head. So there is a desire to be able to maintain that. Yes, some of our people are affected, but even with that, we're working payment plans with them based on the, stimulus checks they'll get. And so the point of that is that even in the midst of something as grave as what we're experiencing, you still have people having a desire to maintain as much normalcy, maintain their roof for their family. That's just a fundamental reality when you're dealing with real estate, quality real estate, quality management. That's inherent to human beings that we all need a good place to live. And so I think that's where, that's part of why you probably see such a large percentage of people investing within Advanta in real estate, because inherently that's the understanding to know that everybody needs a roof over their head, and so it makes for a good opportunity or good investment.
Yes, and I think that's a great point. Being able to make those investments again, just simply that they're tangible. And then, also many people they don't realize that you can make these investments using a retirement account. So it's almost like a new pot of money to pull from to
For
make those
sure.
investments.
Yeah.
We find typically that a retirement account tends to be more liquid than, those personal investments. And so, if somebody's looking to get invested in real estate, the retirement account is a great opportunity to look for those investments that make sense to them, and they have access to that money, which many people just don't realize that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk to people a lot too, I wasn't aware of that, and again, we probably have anywhere from 25 to 30% of our investors investing with IRA money in a apartment investment project or, in our single family home type portfolio. That's pretty standard that 25-30% of those monies are always coming from that. And, so that's why, again, I wanted to connect together with you to really get this information out to more people, because again, a lot of times, unfortunately, people are not aware of it. So for the person that's listening and says, wow, this is awesome, I want to really, take hold of this, what would be the best way to contact your company to find out more information about what they could do with their personal situation?
Well, of course, they can always visit the website, advantaira.com, but, I'm available to answer questions all the time. That's actually really what my job is. I teach classes, I do networking, and I speak to people on a daily basis to answer their questions. So they can reach me on my direct number. I'll give it here, and Randy, I'll make
We'll
sure you have it
include
as
it
well.
for sure.
727-754-9963. That's me directly. And we try to put things, our educational programs are ongoing. And of course, now we're trying to do more and more as people sort of have a need for things like webinars and opportunities to find out that information. And so that stuff is always available.
Well, and I know the folks that work with us that have in turn worked with you have great feedback, and I would just say Larissa's done a great job of, connecting them, helping to understand and walking them through the process. So again, definitely
Thank you.
kudos to you. So yeah, for sure. I would say if you have a desire to find out more, call Larissa directly or reach out through the website to find out more information. And, Larissa, I really truly appreciate you coming on today to share with our listeners. And I know that this has been a blessing and a help for them, and just encourage you and your family, stay safe during this time. And for all of you out there listening, again, let's continue to follow the guidelines here that we have and stay safe during this time here in the country. So thank you so much. Hey, you're very welcome. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Real Estate Preacher Podcast. I hope today that you learned something that you can immediately apply in your life or business. Make sure that you check us out on iTunes or at therealestatepreacher.com for more information. If you want to find out more about partnering together with me personally on real estate deals, including apartment complexes, go to therealestatepreacher.com and click on the Invest with Randy link. I look forward to talking with you personally. Have a blessed and victorious week, for this is the week God has ordained for you.